Good morning. Today is Tuesday, March the 9th, and we continue with our reading of Bright Evening Star by Madeleine as part of our daily Lenten devotion. Thank you for joining me this morning. Jesus was surprised that the church authorities felt outraged when he healed on the Sabbath, so outraged that they wanted to kill him. Surely their anger towards him was similar to the anger of the bus driver, whose face was so stormy it looked like a tornado. And didn't Jesus expect the elders who had been so impressed with him when he was 12 to listen to him with understanding now that he was a man? Surely their rabid anger was baffling to him. When he told his first stories, didn't he expect them to be understood? It was only after his parables met with resentment and rejection that he began to address them pointedly to those whose anger was as irrational as that bus driver. Early in his ministry, he told those who had come to hear his words, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you that you should not resist evil. But if someone smites you on the right cheek, turn your other cheek too." Gentle, if unexpected advice. Yet later on he said, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees! You devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayer. Therefore you shall receive the great damnation." And their anger towards him was as self-centered and ugly as the bus drivers. It is an irrational anger that has not changed in kind since the people screamed, "Crucify him, crucify him." In Iona, we moved intentionally out of the noise of hostility into the quiet of compassion, as though we were recovering from a severe illness. In the morning after breakfast, we took a buggy ride in a cart drawn by a horse named Humphrey. How could a horse named Humphrey not be holy? Clopping along through the stark beauty of the island chosen by Columba, because from its summit he could no longer see Ireland, from which he had been expelled, we felt the holiness that he brought to Scotland, to this island. We felt his awareness that everything is holy because everything is of God. In the afternoon, Lucy and Barbara took a walk across the island. I did not go with them because my knee was painful, and so was my foot, which was swelling hotly and hurting more each day. I would have slowed them down with my limping along, so I sat on a stone wall overlooking the water and wrote, "This land is holy. The sheep and the lambs, the abbeys destroyed in the name of God, the remains of stone huts for God-seeking hermits, the prayers of the nuns, still lingering like fog despite rape and the fire, the sound of their voices singing the praise of God, and the morning, the water for washing, the pots for the porridge, the fishermen's nets, and the sunset through raindrops. When we weren't looking, holiness broke through, bright as a rainbow." I sat on the wall, bathed in peace, listening to the quiet sound of the water. Tourist ferries came and went, but did not break my solitude. There was no room for impatience or darkness of heart. O Jesus, my companion, my guide upon the way, my bright evening star. The day after leaving Iona, we drove to Lynn's farm, the three of us quiet as we travelled, thinking about what had happened, what had nearly happened, trying to see it as Jesus would have seen it. Being with two women of faith was deep and strong, being with two women whose faith was deep and strong helped me, not only to strengthen, but to articulate my own still emerging faith. I knew that Jesus would have seen through the bus driver's hate to the brokenness that caused him to catapult to the darkness within him. I knew that Jesus still sees through the horror of the unhealed wounds that causes acts of terrorism. What darkness was behind the torching of churches in the spring and early summer of 1996? Churches attended largely by black people. This kind of racial hatred is incomprehensible. Do the arsonists think that they are pleasing Jesus? Or are they simply sick people who cannot resist fire? Are they people who hate and fear those who are different? Do they actually think that they are doing God's will? Hate has erased all the normal barriers. The burning of a church of any denomination is always suspicious, far too frequently arson, and cuts across religion and race. But in this spate of one church after another, breaks all statistics of hate and screams out the ghastly loss of the sacred. The powers of darkness seem to be closing in on holiness. And yet how different is this from the raping of the nuns and the burning of the convent in Iona? When I was a child, a church or synagogue used to be safe from vandalism. The sign of the cross was a protection against evil. Silver vessels and candlesticks used to be safe from thievery. What is happening to our places of sanctuary? Hate is like cancer, separate from the normal cells, devouring and not being nourished, annihilating itself along with everything it attacks. Hate is contagious. We asked ourselves how immune we were. I told Barbara and Lucy of an evening newscast where it was suggested that what the world needed was not more prisons, but more churches. It was a strange and wonderful thing to hear on TV, but we asked, are the churches up to the challenge? The need is desperate. We must let go our rigidities and open up to the wonder that God so freely offers. Lucy, Barra, and I are all Episcopalian, but Lucy grew up with the Plymouth Brethren, and Barra grew up in the Catholic Church. Many barriers seem to be falling away as our planet gets smaller, and we learn more about what is happening in far-flung parts of the world. Certainly there are no barriers between us as we travelled and talked and prayed. We didn't have to understand every aspect of our faith in exactly the same way. It was enough that we knew that the incarnation is God's amazing gift of love, and we cannot explain it. When we try to explain it, we lose it, as I discovered in my middle rational years. I do not understand the incarnation. I simply rejoice in it. Lack of provable facts no longer bother me. Theologians and philosophers and biographers have been arguing for 2,000 years. From the Gospels we have a good idea of what kind of person Jesus was, and the Jesus who came to me in the Gospels is far more exciting, than the Jesus of many Sunday schools and sermons. In a recent batch of mail, I had a troubled letter from a young woman who believed that the Gospels indicated that Jesus totally denies the senses. What? Read them again, I suggested. Listen to Jesus. He remarked that John fasted and wore camel's hair, and that he conversely was accused of being a glutton and a wine bibber. We know that he enjoyed drinking, eating with friends, relaxing at the end of the day. He healed the bodies and souls of ill and troubled people. And that's a pretty sensory thing to do. He had close friends, female as well as male. His first miracle was turning water into wine at a wedding feast, and he referred to himself as the groom coming for the bride. He agonized at the thought of going to the cross and begged that he might be spared this terrible cup. No, I don't think Jesus denied the senses and their proper and legitimate uses. He was angered at the abuse of the senses, and that is a very different thing. Now that I think of it, being born was pretty sensory. Was Jesus flesh and blood, as some of the early heresies denied? Or was he energy only, pretending to be flesh and blood? He was born a good Jewish baby, circumcised, brought up according to Jewish law. How on earth did anti-Semitism creep into Christianity when our God was born as an Orthodox Jew? One of the books I remember from my freshman year in college is Henry Adams' Mount St. Michael and Chartreuse. After all these years, the one thing that remains vivid in my mind was the extraordinary people in the Middle Ages living lives of great struggle turned to Mary for comfort. Jesus had become so divinized by the church that he no longer seemed in touch with everyday problems. But Mary was not aloof. She was a woman like other women, bearing babies as all babies are born, in pain and in hope. I have never understood the fear some Protestants have had in the honoring of Mary. Why was she such a threat? Is it largely because of patriarchal society, which sees women as unimportant and unworthy? Did they want Jesus to spring like Athena from his father's brow? Was the incarnation too much for the reasonable male mind? Did giving Mary importance seem to take away from the uniqueness of Jesus? One of the blessings of growing old is that I have finally moved past Thomas with his insistence on seeing the wounds, to knowing that the wounds were there. For me, in you. Perhaps it takes moving through a good deal of chronology to know how thin the world of facts is, and how rich the unprovable love which makes it all is. What I believe in lies now in the realm of love, not fact. Thank you for joining us again this morning, and I look forward to being with you again tomorrow. May your day be full of blessings. Take care, stay safe, and God bless. Bye-bye now.